Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Chatting with the Lightkeeper. As always, I'm Edward, and well, before we dive into dating and the wonderful world of the lifestyle, over the weekend, which, well, still kind of is the weekend, I spread a ton of mulch, and it was great to be outside. It was a little windy and chilly, but it was still great to be outside and enjoy some spring weather. The only thing is it reminded me I'm not as young as I think I am. My legs are a little sore from lifting and moving. Quite a few bags of mulch that were wet with rain makes them twice as heavy, so that was a good workout. My legs are still feeling it, which means the good news is I lifted with my legs, not with my back. And oddly, my left hand feels like I got into a hockey fight. The reason it feels like that is I don't know. It reminds me of back when I was a teenager playing hockey pretty much every single day after school. And there'd be occasional disagreements, which meant, you would it's hockey. You drop your gloves and then throw some punches to settle things. And the weird thing about looking back on those days is I never got into hockey fights with people who weren't my close friends. It was always close friends that ended up in those situations with. And the thing is once it was over, and whatever the disagreement was settled. And it's also odd that I have, outside of the ice rink, I have never, ever, I think once like in elementary school, was I involved in a fight. So it's just kind of one of those oddities how that thing just happened in hockey. But some reason, the way my left hand is hurting, and yes, I am a right-handed person, but when I do um, have a disagreement on the ice, which I haven't in years, but I typically go left because the person is expecting me to be right-handed and wanting to tie up or grab my right arm so I cannot throw a punch. And I learned how to effectively throw punches with my left, so I could avoid that and be a bit of a surprise. Which the bad problem is when you are having a disagreement with your good friends, they quickly learn your little lefty righty strategy. So, yeah, a lot of work and a lot of painfulness on the left hand for a thing that they quickly picked up on. Anyway, before I ramble on that for 20 hours, let's actually move into talking about dating and BDSM. And dating somehow has always felt to me that it is kind of um, overlooked when it comes to all the things that go into building lifestyle relationships. We talk about vetting. Vetting is very important. We talked about vetting, last week on the podcast, and we talk about relationships, and since we're kind of dating now, we'll talk about relationships next week. But the whole process of actually dating seems to get glossed over or somehow get left out, but I think it's still a step that we need to do in the lifestyle. The vetting process typically is something where, we get to know somebody, we do our homework, we trust our guts, and we see how we vibe, and we spend, a good deal of time doing that while we're, of course, getting to know the person, more people that we're starting to vet, and that can it's a great thing because in a way our safety depends upon how well we vet and how well we trust ourselves and the information we've gleaned. Um, so when we actually, decide to meet for that first cup of coffee and conversation, things can feel more advanced relationship wise than what we've traditionally experienced in vanilla world where we could meet somebody we think is attractive in the line at Starbucks and, have a have a brief conversation while we're waiting for our beverages and change phone numbers and meet for coffee later in the week. Where kink just BDSM doesn't work that way. We do the vetting process because we want to stay safe. And so when we have that first date, if you will, we are sort of farther along than we typically were used to in our vanilla dating process. And that's not a bad thing, but we still need to date because we still need to, take the time, spend time with that person to determine whether they're worth the investment of more of our time. And that's, you know, kind of the whole crux of dating is we're spending time to determine whether we want to spend more time with someone. And I know I talk about moving slow, and it is important that we remember that our vetting process is still kind of separate from the dating process. We still have to date, even though we are perhaps more advanced in what we know about a prospective partner, or the person that we're going to go on a date with than maybe what we were in the vanilla world, but we still need to kind of take our time to determine whether they're worth the time. Now, I don't recommend doing what I've done a couple of times in the past, where you meet somebody amazing, you vet them, you kind of move into the dating stage, and for whatever reason, I move too slow. I sort of failed to to like launch it into, you know, from dating to relationship. And perhaps I've missed out on some amazing people and opportunities, but at the same time, I guess looking back on it, I can't cry over spilled milk. I can just kind of learn the lessons, but also tell myself if there was, if there was something that kept me from launching, then perhaps it was a good thing. Perhaps it was something deep down in my brain telling me not to launch. And so, it's a good thing to move at a slow, comfortable pace, but don't perhaps pull an Edward and move too slow or decide not to jump from dating to relationship. It all depends, on where you are in your comfort level. So it's definitely a balancing act, but we can't overlook the importance of dating. Now, when we date in the lifestyle, it is a bit different than when we date vanilla because if you're newer to lifestyle, it's going to seem a bit different, but we have to be very open and honest about our desires, our kinks, what we're looking for, and what we're not looking for, because that all plays a part of it. So we have to be able to have conversations about our wants and needs, not just in the vanilla world, but in the kinktastic one as well. So that can seem a little bit different because when we date vanilla, we try, I mean, it's not that we try, but typically people hide or sort of downplay their desires or their preference, especially when it comes to sex. I mean, the world of vanilla dating, well, I haven't been there in forever, but from what friends share with me, it is still, you don't necessarily talk about sex and all those sorts of things until you're deeper into it. But in BDSM, part of the whole process is, we recognize that we are kinky people, and that is an important aspect of what we're looking for in a partner. So we have to be able to communicate and talk about it. And it's not talking about it in a way that overpowers the conversation or that's the only place the conversation goes. But it is a place that we do need to have conversations go as a part of the determining whether we want to spend more time with them. I'm not saying that we want to jump in and start doing all the kinktastic things that are on our list. But yeah, we have to be able to chat about it. And the other thing that goes along with that is being able to have clear boundaries. We have to be able to set limits and boundaries with where we're comfortable and where we're not comfortable. It's very important to have those boundaries right there with the things that we are fantastically interested in. So not only do we have to, I guess, to sort of paraphrase Meatloaf, know the things that we would do for love and those things that, we won't do that for those things because often when it comes to boundaries and limits, there's more than just one. I guess Meatloaf is a unique individual because he only has that one thing that he won't do for love. So I guess that means Meatloaf has very few limits. Which, hey, rock on, Meatloaf. Uh, the other thing that I'll just mention is that if you're newer, the first few times perhaps that you have these conversations about what you're looking for, it can be hard. It can be, unique to tell somebody that you enjoy spanking or that you are curious about being tied up. But the thing is, those conversations which can seem kind of embarrassing, perhaps, or um, maybe not embarrassing, but a little bit definitely out of the norm. We'll put it that way. Once we have them once or twice, it's actually kind of liberating because you're able to express, your desires without fear. Sure, we might have a little bit of fear of maybe rejection because when we're getting to know somebody and moving into that, we're going to date them. We do, I think, as humans, have a bit of a fear of being rejected for it. But when we are able to share those things that are deep down and things that we don't share perhaps every day in our world, it's actually very, very liberating. And another thing that's different than perhaps past experiences with vanilla is the connections that we form. And it's not the physical connection, but it's the emotional connection that we build while we are starting to date somebody. It's a deeper and more emotional connection that comes about when we start this process and start going down the I like them, they like me rabbit hole. It definitely is more intense on the emotional side than on the vanilla side. And perhaps it's because, um, and this is just my thought, and please let me know if you disagree with me here, but vanilla dating seems to put its emphasis on physical intimacy. Like doing the dance with no pants is the ultimate level of being intimate with your vanilla partner. And yet intimacy is so much deeper. I think we all know that intimacy goes a long way beyond dancing with no pants. But the vanilla world sort of sees that as the ultimate level of intimacy, which we know true to be not the case. But when you're dating, that seems to kind of be, I don't know, a goal or a desire to get to that point. Um, but with BDSM and DS and kink and being kinktastic, building trust, being able to be vulnerable, to be able to feel safe, to do kinktastic potential things with or consider doing kinky things with somebody. It's a much more emotional journey than what we find in the realm of vanilla. So that also goes with a bit of a word of warning. Well, not warning, but just to set an expectation. Because when we start dating, whether we're dating again after a failed relationship or perhaps dating in kink for the first time, um, since things feel more intense than the vanilla things that we perhaps have been used to, the only kicker to that is when things don't work out. because oftentimes when we date, we find that while the person is amazing, they're just not, unfortunately, amazing for us. So when that it's not you, it's me, or hey, this just isn't right, conversations happen and, and things break up. Um, there is, because of that deeper emotional connection, it does feel like it hurts more than what we experienced in the past. And it's not that it hurts more or less. It's not that. It's just because we've opened ourselves up, we've been authentic in ways that we perhaps haven't been authentic in a very long time, or it's the first time or first few times. Those breakups tend to tend to feel as though they do hurt more. But it's just because we've allowed ourselves to finally just be ourselves. And so understand that if things go bump, it's going to hurt. But life goes on. The sun is going to come up tomorrow. It's a new day, and we can learn the lessons that that person brought to us. I believe everybody we interact with brings the potential to teach us life lessons. Sometimes they're amazingly good life lessons. Other times they're amazingly hard lessons that we have to learn through our interactions. But when we approach a failed relationship as things we needed to learn or things we learned, um, it does, at least for me, help handle the disappointment and a little bit of the pain, loneliness that follows. So the other another challenge that we have compared to what we might have been used to is stigma and misconceptions. Remember, there are so many stereotypes associated with kink and kinky relationships, and there's judgment too. I mean, if your friends find out that you're dating somebody who is a dominant or submissive, they're gonna default to their stereotypes and misconceptions, which are most likely not accurate, not helpful. So when you're starting the whole dating process, you need to talk about, stigmas and stereotypes and how you handle them, how the perspective or the person you're dating or people you're dating, how they've handled them, um, and talk about strategies to keep your personal kinktastic side personal. How do you interact with family and friends, and how do we, you know, perhaps keep our kink going, but keep it friendly for everyone around us so they don't discover or only those that we want to know. And how do we navigate that? So next up is obviously we have boundaries and we have desires for new experiences with new people or a new person. And so we really, once again, need to be able to discuss our personal limits, not only our personal limits, but our personal desires. Where do we want to be in a year? Where do we want to be in 5 years? What does that look like? How are we going to get there? And submissives, like the how we are going to get there thing, I think some of you may think that, well, that's the dominant. He's the leader. And so once we say where we want to be in 6 months, in a year, in 2 years, and so on and so forth, I just sit back and follow my dominance leadership. And it's sounds great, but it's not that easy. The whole planning and building part of dating and building to go into your relationship is a mutual thing. You need to talk about it. You need to share ideas and be able to say to the dominant, hey, that's interesting, but I don't think that'll work. Maybe this will be better. And be able to sort of expand our comfort zone safely, consensually, and do it mutually as you as you grow into dating and then grow into or into the relationship. And another thing that I really want to just take a second and talk about is one of the biggest things that over my time in the lifestyle that I've heard repeatedly from back when I was a youngin' in college to where I am now are submissives. Um, when they get to the point where they've finished vetting and they're gone on a date or two and they're really into the dominant that they're seeing, is there's a fear that they're going to disappoint prospective dominant. And I think this is the point where submissives can be at one of their most vulnerable moments because they are liking somebody that is amazing. They don't want to disappoint them. And a dominant who is nefarious can use this point to their advantage to push limits, push boundaries, and to do things that the submissive is uncomfortable with. But because the submissive fears disappointing this wonderful prospective dominant that they've started to date, they go along with things, or they, at this point, decide that during a dating play session, that, boy, I'm really feeling uncomfortable about this. I should probably safe word. And then they have the, oh, I don't want to safe word because I might disappoint this new shiny dominant. So it's very important, submissives, because the regret is that I wish I would have safe worded or I wish I would have stopped things. And I've heard it so many times, and typically it's in this period of a relationship when you're dating and you're starting to, do the things that you do when you start to date. You have a date or two that goes well, and then maybe you add just a touch of kink, and it slowly kind of, rolls and steamrolls into bigger and more kinktastic and wonderful things. But it's so important that if at any point you feel uncomfortable, and not just submissives, but dominants as well, go ahead and stop things because the one thing you can't do is travel back in time and change things. So if you're feeling uncomfortable, you're feeling off, go ahead and stop what's going on because truly the right dominant is not going to be disappointed that you said your safe word. They're actually going to react with kindness and caring. Are you okay? Do you need anything? What's, let's, make sure that you're good. And they're going to be happy that you upheld, you know, your limits or you felt uncomfortable, so you stopped things. That's going to reinforce to them that you are an amazing person who has good boundaries and has good communication skills. So that is something to please remember. Please don't ever feel like you can't stop things because you're going to disappoint a new prospective partner. Another thing that happens when perhaps to people who are newer to kink or newer to each other is sometimes there's disappointment when the fantasy of something doesn't match reality. And when we start to date and start to get deeper into things with somebody that we're dating, we can sort of put fantasies in our mind of what it's going to be like when, for me, I might have what it's going to be like when I spank them the first time. And of course, that's going to sort of be fantasy until maybe it comes true. The thing about fantasies and realities is they don't always add up. And let's also face it, the first time we explore anything uh, intimate like that with somebody new to us, oftentimes the first few times are not necessarily magical. Sometimes they are. Sometimes there's an immediate magical connection that happens in those realms. But oftentimes, to be honest, it might be sort of mediocre. And there's going to be a lot of unsexy conversation that happens. Is this too hard? Is that not hard enough? more of this, less of that. So there's going to be that potential disappointment or frustration when what we are kind of expecting in our mind that we've built up in our mind happens, or it doesn't happen the way it goes. So that is something that's very important to keep in mind, that the whole um, playtime genre is going to be something that gets better with time and communication. So don't have the fantastical visions in your head of have the old Nutcracker thing, the sugar plum fairies dancing in your head. I don't know whether sugar plum fairies are sexy or not. It's been a long time since I've seen the ballet, but I would have to vote probably not. And I'm sure Tchaikovsky was not thinking of sex with the Nutcracker either. So anyway, that's where my mind went there. But just remember, fantasy and reality is going to take a little while, potentially, or it might not, but potentially could take a little communication, a little education about yourself and your partner and how it all fits together to make it, you know, that fantasy come true. Another thing that you need to kind of have a conversation about is the balance of life and the lifestyle. Where is it okay for the dominant to um, start to sort of assert their dominance? What areas of your life are outside the realm of wanting to have a potential DS interaction with your submissive? Uh, how open is the other person about the lifestyle compared to you? And that's another big conversation to have when you start to date. Because perhaps you have somebody that's very active in their local community. It doesn't mean that they're out, say, where their friends and their family, everyone knows they're kinky, and you're very shy, and only a few people know that you're kinky. And shy isn't the right word, but I think you understand what I mean. There can be differences, or perhaps somebody that you start to date is, into the in-person lifestyle, and you prefer not to do that. So you need to have conversations about how that's going to mesh and how that's going to all work out. And perhaps you're not into the in-person lifestyle because you haven't wanted to kind of go alone. And now that you have somebody to potentially go with, it is something that's of interest, because that way you can meet people and it can feel less threatening. Um, or it can be a potential issue that needs to be worked through. And another issue that tends to pop up in in relationships that are kinky is jealousy. And jealousy is an emotion that I am not a jealous person. And when I started to look more at this, and it was a little introspection that I did a few months ago as to why I am not, why don't I think like the way I feel many other people do about jealousy. And it's typically because when I have an insecurity, and that's where I believe jealousy comes from, is that an insecurity has kind of risen up inside me. And perhaps it's because I don't label it as jealousy. I say, okay, this is an insecurity. And the first thing I want to do is try and figure out what the root cause is, what is causing it. And once I think I might have an idea of what's causing it, then it's a conversation that I have with the person that I'm in a relationship with or that I'm dating. Hey, I'm feeling this, and I think this is the cause of it. But you have an open and honest discussion about it, and those types of things help build trust. Because if an insecurity is allowed to grow and blossom, kind of like a weed in the yard, which are, now that it's spring here, are starting to pop up. Thankfully, not in my yard, but there are other yards around where the yellow of dandelions are springing forth along with some green grass. But when you don't address an insecurity, uh, and then it springs up and becomes jealousy, and that leads to trust issues. And yeah, that it's that whole sort of the rolling stone down a hill. It's going to keep picking up momentum and momentum. So make sure that when you start to feel an insecurity, that you have an open and honest discussion with your partner about it, so that you can keep jealousy away and the trust issues that come with it. Um, and also, of course, when we're dealing with insecurities, please don't forget to engage in some self-reflection about it, because it's very important to take that time to reflect on the insecurity, the conversation, and that whole jazz that goes with it, to explore and better understand yourself and where it came from. Because sometimes our insecurities are rooted in fictional things that our mind, took our past experience and applied it to a current situation, which it didn't. Or other times, sometimes our insecurities can be sort of like our little voice in our head giving us an early warning that hey, something is off here. We need to figure out what's off. And sometimes, unfortunately, it's not us, it's them. There is something that has happened legitimately to trigger our insecurities, and that's a whole other thing. But just always trust yourself. So the final thing when it comes to dating in DS is we're gonna have conflicts. As wonderful as the internet's try to make, lifestyle relationships seem, they're not any easier than you know, the things that our vanilla friends have. They take work, they take communication, and they take conflict resolution. It's so very important to have and be able to effectively communicate clearly, um, to check in with your partner. How are they doing? How are they feeling? Not only about the dynamic, but the relationship. What are some things that they like? What are some things that might concern them? And so the more proactive we can be, the easier it is to meet those challenges before they happen. But when they do happen, remember to be an active listener. Ask questions, make sure that you understand, stay calm. Can't repeat that one enough. Stay calm, stay cool, stay collected. And even if you're a dominant, just because you're a dominant doesn't mean you are compromise avoidance. Sometimes we all have to compromise. I'm not saying compromise on a limit or compromise on a boundary. That's not it at all. But compromise on things. Be willing to, meet your date halfway. Uh, maybe they're in the mood for seafood and you're in the mood for a steak. So, even if you are the dominant and could insist on going to a steak restaurant, um, you know, meet your meet your meet the person you're dating halfway and go to a steak and seafood restaurant. So everyone gets what they want. So don't forget about compromise. Now, I'm me, and if you know me, you know what we're going to talk about next. And this will be the last bit we talk about on dating in the lifestyle. But since I am safety conscious, we need to talk about being safe when we start to date in the lifestyle. It's so very important, especially since so many people meet people that they've vetted and are going to potentially start dating online. It's a fact of life. The online world makes connections much easier and better, um, for people in DS, because it's easier to find somebody, you know, potentially through a blog or social media, identifying them as being involved in a lifestyle, than it is to run into them at a Starbucks or a grocery store. Because let's face it, most of us don't wear our I love BDSM t-shirts when we are shopping at the store or waiting for our latte at the coffee shop. So when you are going to meet somebody for a date, and not just the first date, but for the first few, please take these into mind. And I apologize if they're things you all know. This is just me being me and bringing them up because, well, I want to talk about it to keep everyone safe. Meet in a public place. Don't go to their house. Don't go to their grandmother's house. Don't go to their uncle's house, and don't go to their best friend's house. All sorts of things like that. But meet in a public place and make sure it's if you're meeting after dark or the time you spend together could go, into the evening where the sun goes down. Make sure it's well lit. Make sure it's a busy place like a restaurant, a cafe, perhaps a pub. Um, Please do avoid secluded areas. And as I said before, don't meet them at their house or meet them at a hotel room, especially the hotel room. That's very rarely do I ever hear of good things coming out of something like that. Um, Now, I will say when it comes to hotel rooms, sometimes because we live in the world where we do with the internet, we meet somebody who is amazing, and maybe they're, couple of 100 miles or more away. So there's traveling involved. If you are traveling to meet somebody, chances are you've chatted online, you've video chatted, you've really vetted your butt off because you know, the distance makes us want to do and be more sure and we feel we really know them. Please make sure to travel independently, meaning that you are not dependent upon your date for your travel arrangements, whether they're paying for gas or your hotel. Have your own arrangements made, and don't feel bad about maybe not sharing them. Perhaps share, hey, I will, you know, my plane will be landing in Chicago around 3:15, and by the time I catch an Uber, I should be at my hotel around, you know, 4:30, 5 o'clock. So how about we plan to meet at whatever restaurant at, say, 7. Have your own arrangements, have your own place to stay if you're traveling. So that way, if things don't work, you can retreat to your space, your safe space, away from the person and go from there. So that's that. And also remember, tell a family member, tell a friend, trusted family member, um, tell them who you're meeting, where you're going, when you expect to be, done with it. And it's okay to sort of have yourself on a curfew for a first date. Hey, we'll meet for coffee and I'm free from 6:30 to 8:30 and, set your alarm on your phone and say, okay, hey, it's 8:30. It's been great. I've got to go. Um, so that way you just keeps yourself safer and you have, that time frame, you have that break. Plus, it'll kind of, if things go well, it'll leave your date wanting more because they'll want to spend more time with you. You'll want to spend more time with them. Um, Another thing is when you're telling your trusted friend where you're going, who you're going to be with, consider putting one of those location sharing apps on your phone so that they can see where you are. So if something goes bump, and you leave the coffee shop, for whatever reason, they can see where you are, or if they don't, if you don't check in with your trusted friend like you should, they can bring up the app and see where your phone is. Uh, Also, have safe calls set up for your time with your first few dates, where um, you have somebody call just to check in and see how you're doing. And there's no crime in being open that, oh, hey, this is my safe call, just a second. If it is somebody who is potentially up to no good, they're going to be like, ooh, this person takes their safety seriously. I might just want to exit stage left. and not go any deeper into this. And if they're a great person, they're going to be happy and they're going to understand. So please utilize safe calls, whether it's text, actual phone calls, or of course have a means to kind of send an SOS to your trusted friend. Get me out of here. This person's a real unique person, and I don't want to be here anymore. Please, please, please call me and say I have to go back to the office or that my ancestor's cousin's goldfish died. Whatever it is, have the good and the bad plans planned. Um, Now, it can be very common nowadays to, meet for a drink. Nothing wrong with having a drink with somebody new. But if you decide to, have a little alcohol, it can maybe make us a little more talkative, take the edge off, what have you. Really, really be very, very moderate in your drinking. And of course, anytime we drink or eat, make sure you don't leave your drink unattended or out of sight. Uh, Same with your food. If, all those wonderful things that we need to keep in mind, please keep them in mind and please, please stay sober so you can make good choices. And finally, during the day, trust your gut. If something feels off, something feels uncomfortable, it is probably the case. And don't feel bad about excusing yourself early and ending the date early. I'm sorry, this just isn't clicking for me, or, hey, I'm sorry, I'm just really stressed from work and I just I want to go home. Excuse me, server, can I get my check and, get out of Dodge? Um, so please don't feel bad about that. It's better to excuse yourself than find yourself in a bad situation. So remember, trust yourself. If the vibe isn't there, it's just not there and it's okay. Then finally, just a few general sort of safety tips. Make sure your phone's charged up. You don't want to be in a situation where, okay, perhaps the date's going amazing and you're going to go from the coffee shop, next door to the ice cream shop for dessert. Um, but your phone isn't charged and you know that your trusted friend is going to be calling you for safe calls or safe text, and you're not going to be able to answer them because your phone is dead, and they're going to start to worry and freak out. And so, not only that, if you need your phone for any reason, just make sure before you go out it is charged so you can easily call or text if it is needed. Of course, pay attention to your surroundings. I talked about that with watching our drinks, but pay attention to what's going on around you and who is nearby. It's very important to be aware of your surroundings and not just put all of your focus on the date who is sitting across from you or next to you or however that works for you. Pay attention to your surroundings, be aware. And as I said before, trust yourself. If something feels wrong, something feels off, it's okay to call it a day, a night, and get out of there. Because the only person in this world that can keep you safer is yourself. And trust me, you are an amazing person, and I don't want anything to happen to you. So please, please, please keep yourself safe and date, explore, have fun, but do so in a manner that keeps you safe and sound. So that is this week's show. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you don't forget to do a little bit of dating. When it comes to the DS world, don't just jump from vetting to relationship. Invest the time to see whether somebody is worth the time, and then build upon that. So next week we're going to actually talk about when we've invested the time in dating and the person is amazing and we are now in a relationship. What does that look like, and what are some of the potential challenges? And talk a little bit about that. So I do have a request before I end the show. No matter what app or site you are listening to the podcast from, I would absolutely love it if you clicked the follow button. And what that'll do is just drop you a notification whenever there is a new episode of the podcast out, which is every Tuesday. But you'll get that little notification so you never miss an episode and you can always stay up to date. So thank you very much for listening. I appreciate you taking the time and spending the time here with me, and I can't wait to chat with you again next week.